Welcome. My name's Tim Bone and I've done a video today where I'm going to be discussing the behaviour of politicians with you. I already hear you say, who are they? Yes, I know exactly. That's what this video is pretty much about. Now, there are some people watching this video who'll probably likely get very offended from the content of this video. And that person is the politician who gets himself or herself involved in a lot of campaigning, standing up for the things that they truly believe in, and as well as that, representing their constituents, making their constituents their number one priority in life. Now, that's the politician who will get offended by watching this video. And what I have to say to that politician is, I make no apologies for how offended you may feel watching this video. I, at the end of the day, can only pass comment on what I have witnessed, on what I have observed, and what my experiences have been. If you are a member, if there are politicians out there who are committed to their work and their constituents, then I'm afraid to say it, you make up a very small minority of the politician population. And I would have to say to you that I'm still to meet you. And until I meet you, I can't possibly make videos where I'm saying good things about you. How can I say good things about someone if I've not yet met that someone? So, if you're unhappy with the content of this video, then what my advice to you would be, blame your colleagues. Because at the end of the day, it is your colleagues that are giving you a bad name, as a result of their lack of passion and commitment shown towards their jobs, as well as their constituents. Now, the politician that you've just heard me speak to there is a politician who at one time felt very passionate about a set of views, beliefs, values and principles, which they still feel passionate about to this day. And what they chose to do, as a result of feeling passionate about these views, beliefs, values and principles, was they chose to join a cause that was consistent with these things, where they thought that there was no better cause to join other than a political party. Now, this turned out to be a cause that they wanted to give a certain number of hours of their life to, which a full-time job would not allow them to do. And therefore they saw becoming a politician as being the way in which they could go about giving the number of hours they wished to give to the cause that they had become a part of. That is, the political party that they had become a part of. Now, if you have one of these politicians as your locally elected political representative, then you are a very lucky person, because these people make up a very small minority of the population of locally elected political representatives that exist out there. Most of us, I'm afraid to say it, have to put up with a non-committed person who doesn't feel passionate about any views, beliefs, values or principles, and just sees politics as a skive. That's what most of us have as our locally elected political representative. And therefore, if you've got the other type of politician that I had just been describing there to you, then you're a very lucky person. And what you should do come your next election is you should vote for that person, regardless of what party they're a member of. Because what you want in a politician is somebody who's going to represent your interests, and represent them well, if you ever need them to represent your interests. Now, in this video, you'll hear me make reference to politicians using a certain number of different terms. Sometimes you'll hear me talk about MPs, which are members of Parliament, if you're in the United Kingdom. Sometimes you'll hear me talking about MSPs, which are members of the Scottish Parliament, if you're living in Scotland. And also sometimes you'll hear me talking about local city councillors, who are people who represent your interests in the local council. Basically, in Scotland, what we've got is we've got MSPs, MPs and local city councillors. And they all represent people at different layers of government. The councillors represent you at local authority level, the MSP represents you at the Scottish Parliament level, and the MP represents you at the Westminster government level. And all of these people, regardless of whether or not they're an MSP, MP, or a city councillor, they can all be made reference to as being locally elected political representatives. So sometimes you'll hear me say MSP, other times you'll hear me use the term MP, and also you'll sometimes hear me use the words city councillor, or sometimes you'll just hear me use the words locally elected political representative whenever you hear me make reference to politicians. The thing all these people have in common with one another is they're all politicians. That is, they're all locally elected political representatives. You'll have your own name for these people, whatever country it is you're from. Now, one thing I want to ask you is this. How many of you watching could name your locally elected political representative without needing to do a Google search? How many? I bet the answer to that question is not many. It is amazing how often I come across people who say to me, is this an SNP constituency, a Labour one, a Conservative one, a Liberal Democrats one? Who is our locally elected political representative? And what party are they a member of? I hear that coming so often from people. And I can tell you now, the first thing whoever it is they ask that question to then does is they go immediately to their mobile phone and Google it. Because they don't know. I mean, think about it. If you were in a coffee shop and you were standing in a queue, and your locally elected political representative was standing in front of you, and they suddenly turn round and pass comment on the price of the cakes, would you think to yourself, oh my God, it's my locally elected political representative standing in front of me in a coffee shop speaking to me? Would you think that? Or would you just think to yourself, an average man or woman speaking to me in a queue about the price of cakes in this cafe? Which one of the two would you be thinking to yourself? I can tell you now, with the majority of people, it would be the latter, not the former. Here's another question for people, and that is, if you were to be walking down your local main road and you saw your locally elected political representative standing on the street corner giving a speech to an audience over a local political matter, where there's no reference made in that speech to the fact that the person giving that speech is your locally elected political representative, and nor is there any reference in the local vicinity to them being your locally elected political representative, such as a placard or a banner, for example, would you be thinking to yourself, oh look, there's my locally elected political representative doing a speech on a local political matter that he or she will be trying to resolve, and is sharing with his constituents what work they've done on resolving this issue to date? Or would you just think to yourself, there's an average man, average woman in the street doing a speech talking about some matter, some local matter. Don't know who the hell they are, never seen them in my life. Which one of these two responses would be going on in your internal dialogue? I can tell you now that for the vast majority of people, it would be the latter of these two internal dialogues that would be going on in their mind as they walk past that locally elected political representative doing their speech on that street corner. I can tell you now that if the average man or woman picked up a newspaper tomorrow and read a story about their local elected political representative being found out to have been running a brothel in the local constituency, where they had been employing school leavers who couldn't get jobs to work in that brothel, and there was a photograph of his face, as well as a photograph of him in handcuffs, being put in a police car, And his political party managed to keep it out of the newspapers that he was the locally elected political representative, as well as what party he was a member of. I can tell you now, the average man or woman reading that newspaper story would not think, oh my God, there's my local city councillor or my local MP or MSP being found out to be running a brothel. Oh my God, that's shocking. No, they wouldn't think that. They would just think, there's a sleazy, unpleasant, despicable lowlife of a man taking advantage of school leavers, not being able to get jobs. Hope he gets a very long time in prison. And that is about as much as most people would probably think. And then it would be like, right, that was page 4, let's turn over to page 5. What's the next story? And that's about as much of a response that the average person would give such a story they were reading in the newspaper. It's amazing how few people know who the city councillor is. If you're living in Scotland, you're a member of the Scottish Parliament. If you're in the UK, you're a member of Parliament. And like I said, you'll have your name for these people, wherever it is you're from. And it is amazing how few people know who these people are, and how few people would recognise these people's faces in the street and wouldn't recognise their names. If somebody was to ever say to them, I'm going to meet so-and-so today. Now, my local city councillor is a man called Alex Bellick. And Alex Bellick is the city councillor for the Glasgow South Central ward. And I live in a part of Glasgow called Govanhill. And let me tell you, the vast, vast majority of people living in Govanhill, we're talking more than 90%, okay, would not know Alex Bellick's name, and nor would they know his face. And if you were to tell them that he was a city councillor, they probably wouldn't even know what that meant. If you were to say to them, do you know what the job description of a city councillor is? Most people would look at you with a blank face and go, no, inform me, please. This man, and other city councillors like him, are probably on salaries of about £50,000–£60,000 per annum. And they make decisions that affect my life, your life, have the potential to be life-transforming decisions, where when I say life-transforming decisions, very often these decisions are life-transforming for the worse, not for the better. Not only do these people get to enjoy salaries of £50,000–£60,000 per annum, but they're also given a budget called expenses. Now, these expenses that they are given to them to meet the costs of carrying out whatever activities they need to carry out to be able to do their job. And these councillors will be misusing these expenses by doing things like taking their wives for meals and just putting it on expenses. Or taking their wives to the theatre and watching shows. Or buying their wife a car or something like that. And then saying that he needs the car for work purposes. It's a very handsome job when you look at the salary and when you look at the expenses they get to enjoy, as well as when you look at their workloads. It's an absolute gift of a job. And it's certainly for anyone that loves a skive, let me tell you that now. And most people, like I've already said, living in Govanhill, would not know who Alex Bellick was. And what applies to the average person living in Govanhill applies to the average man and woman living anywhere in Scotland or in the United Kingdom, or I probably dare say any country in the modern Western world. In fact, you're more likely of learning about who the Defence Secretary is of South Africa than you are learning who your local city councillor is, or your local MSP or MP is. Which is amazing when you think that the Defence Secretary of South Africa is thousands of miles away. And yet you're more likely of being familiar with the name of the Defence Secretary of South Africa than you are the name of your locally elected political representative. That's absolutely shocking. Absolutely shocking. Now, why are they so low profile, these people? These people who are meant to play large roles in my life and your life. Why are they so unheard of? Well, the answer to that question is quite simple, and that is they do nothing. Okay? That's why they're unheard of in your life. That's why they're unheard of in my life. Because they do absolutely nothing. It's a cushy job. You get paid megabucks for doing nothing. Amazing, isn't it? Have you ever tried writing to these people? I've tried writing to these people in the past. And there are only two things you need to be really good at if you're going to be a politician, by the way. Okay? I'll take my hat off to them for this. You've got to be good at these two things. So don't ever think about becoming a politician if you're not really good at these two things, okay? Right? You've got to be gifted at these two things that I'm just about to mention. And these are, one, not replying, and two, meeting with you and just giving you false promises to take action, but to take no action. These are the two things you have to be really good at, okay? And every politician seems to excel at these two skills that they've got, these two talents, these two gifts that they were born with. The gift to not reply and the gift to be all talk and no action. If you think about the roles that these people are meant to play in our lives, okay? And if you think of the populations of people that they represent, think about it. Your locally elected political representative is somebody that you should be reading about the whole time in your local newspapers. The whole time. Come on, think of how many people in their constituency must be needing representing at any one time. And think of all the issues that people would be coming to them with. And think of all the issues that they'd be working towards trying to resolve for their constituents. I can tell you now, if these people were doing their jobs and doing them well, doing them properly, your local newspaper would be forever being full of stories about how your locally elected political representative went and did something truly remarkable for a local constituent. And there's one thing I'm very confident of indeed, and that is, throughout any term of government, I can be pretty certain that at no time will I pick up a newspaper and read about my locally elected political representative doing anything truly remarkable for someone, despite this being something that I should be coming across the whole time. And there's your evidence that they do nothing. I can't remember the last time I picked up a newspaper and read about about a locally elected political representative doing something amazing for their constituents. What I can tell you is that I've opened up local newspapers where I've read stories about people doing amazing things for other people, where there's been a picture of the locally elected political representative in that story shaking the hand of the person who did that truly remarkable thing. But never is it a story about the locally elected political representative doing anything truly remarkable. They are a right bunch of waste of spaces, and they are a right waste of taxpayers' money. Now, the problem with the job of a politician is it's not like the kind of job that you do, nor is it like any of the kind of jobs I have done either. They are not jobs where you get supervisions, which, as you will know, are events that happen every month in a job where you and your boss or you and a senior will sit aside somewhere and your boss or your senior will evaluate your performance and will tell you how well you're doing or not doing, and they'll give you advice on how to improve and what they would like to see more of and what they'd like to see less of, all for the purpose of making you bigger and better at your job. Now, this just doesn't happen with politicians. Politicians never sit down with anyone from their party without someone asks them, how many constituents are you currently representing? Nor do they get asked, how many constituents have you represented since the last time we met? Nor do they ever get asked, how many issues that constituents have come to you with have you resolved? They never get asked these questions, ever. And the other thing about their job is that there are no targets for them to meet. Think about it. Every person's job has some sort of target that they have to work towards achieving. Now, with locally elected political representatives, there are no targets. Absolutely no targets whatsoever. And never is anyone evaluating your performance on a monthly basis, like happens in other jobs. And if, as a result of this, politicians are at total liberty to ignore anyone contacting them and asking them for help with resolving a local political issue. They're at total liberty to be able to say, that case looks complicated, so I'm not going to go near it. They're also at total liberty to say, that case is easy, so it's trivia, so I'm not going to go near it either. In fact, they're at total liberty to say, do you know something, for the whole duration of my time in power, I am not going to represent a single constituent. I'm just going to put my feet up at the desk and fall asleep. Wake me up at the next election. And I'm afraid to say it, that is the closest thing they will ever get to a supervision, is an election, which is once every 5 years. And the truth is, elections are not effective supervisions because people tend to vote for party. They don't tend to vote for who the locally elected political representative candidate is. They don't vote for the person. Like I say, they vote for the party. And therefore it's the party that the person is a member of that gets them elected, and not the hard work that they've done and the results that they've delivered upon. I mean, where I'm from, a nationalist voter will always vote for the candidate standing in an election who is from the Nationalist Party. And they will show no concern as to whether or not that candidate is somebody who has done a good job in the past when they've been in power, when they've been elected. All they're interested in is what party this person belongs to. And because they are a nationalist, and because they vote nationalist, they will just vote for that candidate, regardless of what kind of record, image that candidate has. A nationalist will vote for a nationalist, even if that person standing as a nationalist at the next election is a 10-year-old girl brownie. And therefore that's the other problem with politicians, is they don't have to impress, they don't have to perform to encourage and to convince others into voting for them. It is more often than not the party that they are a member of that determines whether they get re-elected, and not what they did while they were in office that determines whether or not they get elected. And the job of being a politician, as I've already said, is an absolute skive, okay? And unfortunately, the vast majority of people who are politicians are not sense of purpose driven people. And this is evidenced by the politicians that I've tried to get in touch with over matters concerning my life. That city councillor I told you about, Alex Bellick, I wrote to him once telling him I wanted to meet with him about local laws regarding daytime noise coming from home renovation. I wanted to meet with him to tell him that There are people who work from home. They see clients from home. They're on the phone to important professionals about clients from home. They also have Zoom meetings with to discuss with colleagues, to discuss contracts, to discuss potential partnerships and things from home. And therefore, the last thing they need is people drilling holes in walls and causing their house to shake while they're having these meetings, or while they're seeing these clients, or while they're engaging in these phone calls about these very important matters regarding clients. I also said to Alex Bellick that you also get people who are shift workers and they've just come off the night shift and they've just gone to bed and they're going back on the night shift that night. And the last thing they need throughout the day is loads of drilling. And therefore I told them that I wanted to meet with him to discuss introducing into the law if a person is going to be doing loud, noisy renovation work, then they should at least give you a day's notice to let you know that it's going to be happening so you can make alternative plans. And I thought that was a reasonable request, and I thought it would also be an easy job for him. I didn't think I was asking of him anything difficult for him to do. And did he reply to my letter? No, didn't reply one bit. I've also written to him over other matters, which again he's never got back in touch with me over. This complaint that I've had about noise, I did take it up once with my local member of the Scottish Parliament back in my previous home address, and I'll give it to her. She did come round to my house and she did meet with me and we had a meeting. But when I told her the reasons why a person should have to put something through your door to tell you that they're going to be working on their home, so that you can make whatever arrangements you need to make to accommodate the noise that they will be making, my MSP said to me, right, Mr. Bone, you've certainly put a very strong case across as to why why a neighbour should tell you in advance they're going to be doing work on their home and they're going to be making a lot of noise. Therefore, what I'll do is I'll take back to the council everything that you've told me, and I will speak to somebody in the Environmental Protection Services, and I will discuss this thing that you are saying is missing from the law that should be put in practice, and I'll get back in touch with you. And I was like, well, thank you for listening to me, thank you for getting in touch with me. Others don't. And what happened was I didn't hear anything back for about 2 weeks, and then I got a phone call from my member of the Scottish Parliament, where they said to me, right, Mr. Bowen, like I said to you, I'd go off and I'd speak to somebody from Environmental Protection Services, and what I've been told to tell you is the next time anybody makes noise, okay, that's unannounced, you're just to phone somebody from the Environmental Protection Services and they'll deal with it appropriately for you, okay? And I was like, that's great, thank you for doing that for me, that was very kind of you. And then what happens is probably about 5 or 6 weeks later, somebody's putting double glazing windows in downstairs, and there is so much banging, there is so much noise, it is beyond belief. And I phone up the environmental protection people and I say that there's somebody downstairs doing a lot of noise on putting in double glazing, and it's stopping me from being able to get on with any of my work. I was told to phone you by my MSP, who said that you would give an appropriate response to this if I spoke to somebody up at the Environmental Protections Department the next time such noise happened. It's obviously happening now, which is why I've now contacted you. And all they could say to me on the phone was, yes, Mr. Bone, we've heard about you, yes, and we're to give you an appropriate response, aren't we? And then they said to me, right, okay, well, the appropriate response is this. These people aren't breaking the law, so there's nothing we can do. And I was like, what? And the guy says, they're not breaking the law, so I'm afraid to say we can't do anything. And I couldn't believe this. Basically, I had just gone round in a circle. I was basically no further forward than I was before I met with my member of the Scottish Parliament, who had done absolutely nothing. All my member of the Scottish Parliament had done was passed her obligation to me onto someone else who isn't obliged to do anything for me other than just do what the law says, and that's it. And this is a good example how when politicians meet with you, they just disappoint you. They just let you down. I'm a mental health advocate, And I've not just been an advocate for people with mental health conditions, I've also been an advocate for people with physical disability. And what I have seen during my work over the years is I have seen a lot of abuse and neglect that social work services have been guilty of treating people with disability and mental health problems with. And I went to my local member of the Scottish Parliament, who's a member of the opposition party. Okay, that's the party that's not in power. It's the next biggest party after the party that are in power. And I went to the local member of the Scottish Parliament, who is a member of the opposition party, and I told her that the abuse and the neglect that social work services in Scotland are guilty of should be exposed. And there should be a big story on it that doesn't just expose social work services, but should also expose the Scottish Government for not doing anything about it when it's been reported to them, that this abuse and neglect goes on. And I told this woman that what I wanted to do was I wanted to do a study where I'd be asking people who use social work services what their experiences of using social work services have been. And not just people who are currently receiving social work services, but also people who have once received social work services, or family members of people who are no longer here, but were at one time clients of social work services. These were the kinds of people that I was wanting to interview, and I was wanting to interview these people in very large numbers, and I was hoping by going to my member of the Scottish Parliament that she would be able to give me the opportunity to access some sort of resource that would allow me access to interviewing huge numbers of present day and previous day service users of social work services, so that I could get their experiences, so I could get a record of their experiences of abuse and neglect, which I could then create a file on that would be full of evidence of hundreds, maybe even a few thousand cases of abuse and neglect that social work services were guilty of, which I could then dump on the doorstep of government and the media just before an election. That's what I was planning on doing. And that was the role I saw my local member of the Scottish Parliament being able to play. And that was give me access to resources that would give me the opportunity to interview such people in quantities that would allow me to put a huge archive of evidence together that would make today's government unelectable come the next election, and would also result in huge shake-ups in the law. After telling this woman what I was planning on doing and what I saw her role as being, all she could do was say, right, Mr. Bone, I've heard what you have to say about the abuse and neglect that goes on in social work services. I've heard what you have to say about the study that you want to carry out and why you want to carry it out, what you want to do with these results. And I've also heard what you're asking me, how you see me as being able to help you. So can I just respond by saying, first of all, I know how you feel about social work services. They're a bunch of lowlifes, and they do mistreat people, and they're not kind to people with disability and other vulnerability, and people affected by other vulnerabilities. And there does need to be a shake-up in social work services, and your study would be a way in going about achieving that. And then she went on and said, what I am doing is I'm speaking next month at a charity where there will be a human rights lawyer speaking at that charity. And I will ask him if he would be prepared to share with you any information he's got on cases of clients of social work services who he's represented. And she also said that there was an academic at Glasgow University who was doing a study on something similar to what I was talking about for other reasons. And she said that she would speak to them and ask them if they'd be prepared to share some of their findings with me. And I thought, well, that all sounds very good. But that's all she said. And when I left, I thought to myself, right, she's going to these two men who she hopes are going to contact me. But let's remember, these men don't have any obligation to help me. And these men don't have any vested interests in helping me. They're not getting paid to help me or anything like that. They're not going to be rewarded for helping me. And therefore I can be sure that they won't help me. I can be sure that they will not get back in touch with me. And that's exactly what happened. Nobody got back in touch with me. And all my MSP had done was just passed her obligation to me onto someone else. Never could I accuse her of not meeting her obligations. She could say she met with me. She could say she listened to me. And she could say that she referred what I came to her with to someone else. And it was up to that someone else now to contact me and deliver on their word. And if they didn't, well, that had nothing to do with her. That was a conflict that I had with them and not with her. Okay? And therefore this is a good example of where she can say she's done her job without doing any job. Alright? Now what I can say from my experiences of doing advocacy work and also from my interest in politics, what I can say is that the most frequent complaint a constituent would ever go to their locally elected political representative with would be a complaint regarding social work services. And therefore I would have expected this local MSP of mine to have said to me, Mr. Bone, I've had loads of cases where people have come to me with their complaints about social work services, and these have been the following complaints. Therefore, if you want, what I will do is I will share with you all the complaints that people have come to me with, and you can use these as part of your study. I would have expected her to have offered me that. I would also have expected her to have anticipated in the future coming across a lot of social work complaints. And therefore she would also often offer the facility of sharing with me information regarding all the complaints her constituents came to her with concerning social work services. And the very fact that she never offered me information on cases that she had worked on in the past, nor offered to provide me with information on future cases she dealt with, and complaints to do with social work services, it tells me she's had very little experience of representing people who have come to her with complaints over their social work services, and also she doesn't anticipate having people coming to her in the future with complaints regarding social work services, which therefore evidences to me that she is not a proactive member of the Scottish Parliament. I mean by that is she does not spend her time representing her constituents. Because if she did spend her time representing her constituents, she would have offered me these two facilities, as without a doubt. The fact that it never occurred to her to offer me these two facilities tells you that she's in the past spent little time representing, and she plans on doing very little representing in the future. Politicians are just useless beings, I'm afraid to say it. Now, another thing politicians are absolutely useless at, as is the political parties that they belong to, is being in opposition. Okay? For the whole 5 years that a government is in government for, members of the opposition party will just spend these 5 years just standing on the sidelines, doing nothing. All they will do for that 5 year period is stand there and say, oh, government are stupid. Oh, the government have come up with a daft policy. Oh, goodness me, this is why you shouldn't have voted for them and you should have voted for us. Oh my God, they're going ahead with such a stupid decision, and it will come to surface in a few years' time what a bad decision that was, and we'll all have to pick up the pieces. Oh, goodness me, the First Minister yet again demonstrates his incompetence. Oh my God, we're all doomed. The world's going to blow up because this government are in power. That's all they can do. And that's all they do for 5 years of being in opposition. They don't do anything other than that. They just stand at the sidelines and they just chant hate speech and just do name calling and just do lots of criticising of government practice. And that's it. That's all they do. They don't do anything other than that. And that's pathetic, okay? I'm sorry, but I believe that opposition parties' roles should be much more proactive ones. Opposition parties shouldn't spend their 5 years just passing comment and doing nothing other than that. Opposition parties should be much more politically proactive. They should be spending their time in opposition investigating the government, spying on the government, exposing the government, exposing the behind the scenes of government, that's exposing to the public the corruption that goes on in government, the deceitful, the dishonest, the dishonourable nature of the political practice of the politicians who are in power, so that the civilians of a country can see what a party in power is truly like as a party, and will therefore know not to vote for that party come the next election. You see, that was the role opposition parties played, and that was to police government and expose government by carrying out investigations and by snooping around. I can tell you now, every government in power would feel for the whole duration of time that they were in power that the opposition party are standing behind them looking over their shoulder, and therefore they better not be found out to be doing anything dishonourable, deceitful, dishonest, etc. And therefore they better make sure that they practice in a professional way and in an honourable way. Therefore, if opposition parties functioned like this, governments in power would behave more honourably and would do their jobs more professionally, as would the politicians who are members of these parties. But unfortunately, opposition parties don't behave like this. They just stand there on the sidelines going, "You're a stupid such and such." They just stand on the sidelines going, "The government are useless," or "The government are a bunch of idiots," or "Here we go again, history repeating itself." Doomed. That's all they do. And to be honest with you, that's useless. It really is. It doesn't play any role. It doesn't go about improving the quality of lives of those living in the country. They're pathetic. They have a pathetic presence, and they serve a pathetic purpose when they're in opposition. That is parties and their politicians. And they do nothing other than demonstrate incompetence when such parties and politicians are in power. When I look at politicians, I think to myself, what you can be sure of is when they stand for election, they want to win. They want to get elected. Let's be honest, being a politician means being on a handsome salary, being allowed to enjoy expenses, in a job where there are no targets, nor are there any obligations, where you're at liberty to just sit back and put your feet up for 5 years doing nothing. Who wouldn't want a job like that? And therefore, when they stand at election and the results are being called out, they'll be thinking, "Please, please be me that wins. Please, please be me that wins." But you know what I think might be a myth in the world of politics? Okay? One of the things I think might be a myth is that parties want to win the election. That's right. It wouldn't surprise me if it were to turn out that political parties don't actually want to win the election, and they are all hoping that they will be elected a party of opposition instead. Because if you think about it, if you're a member of a political party that wins the election, and you're now going to be made a cabinet secretary, that's when the hard work begins. Being in power is hard work for those who are playing a political role at cabinet level. When you're in power, you are constantly under the scrutiny of the public and also the media. When you're in power, you have roles, responsibilities, and obligations to country that you cannot run away from, and you have to fulfil. However, when you're in opposition, you don't have any of these things to contend to. And therefore, when you see politicians on the nights of general elections, where their party has won the general election, and they're all standing there with their glasses of champagne, all hugging one another, all saying hooray, all smiling, all looking very happy for the cameras, they're probably all secretly thinking inside of their minds, oh bloody hell, we won. Oh God. Oh geez, oh now the hard work begins. Oh Christ, now we're going to be under public scrutiny. Oh God, now we're going to have the media scrutinising every move we make and every decision we make. Oh God, why did we have to win? This is where the hard work begins. We're going to have all these obligations now that we're going to have to meet. We're going to have all of these responsibilities that we're going to have to fulfil. Oh geez, why did we have to win? And while they're saying this to themselves, they're also thinking to themselves, keep smiling for the cameras, keep smiling for the cameras, still try and look like you're happy that you won. And it wouldn't surprise me, seriously, if that is the reality, if that is the attitude that politicians truly have towards winning elections. All politicians I've come across, and at least the vast majority of politicians a person can expect to come across, are people who have no passion whatsoever for the views, the beliefs, the values that they say, that they told you they had a passion for at the time of trying to get elected. Once these people are elected, that's when you come to realise the truth about them, and that is they don't have any passions for these views, beliefs and values, principles that they claim to have a passion for. Now you will remember from other videos that I've made, society has what's called the misfit. And the misfit is another term for the square peg. I'm sure you've heard people talk about the square peg of society. And in previous videos that I've done, especially the functionality continuum, what I explained to you was that the square peg is somebody who has got high IQ, high ability to apply intellect to practice, is neither academic or vocationally gifted, but has been born with a gift, such as, or a skill or a talent, such as being good at art, being a comedian, being good at acting, entrepreneurialism, gifted at a sport, or something else that they truly excel at and become a very successful person at. And I said that these people probably make up about 5% of the population. Now I would say politicians are misfits as well, but I wouldn't say they're that type of misfit. I would say they're another type of misfit. What I would say is that they are somebody who does not score high on ability to apply intellect to practice, might or might not score high on IQ, and they're not born with a gift or a talent or a skill or for anything, and they're totally phobic of any role or responsibility. And this, I'm afraid to say it, is too often the type of person that becomes a politician. They probably have average ability to apply intellect to practice, but if you go to my functionality continuum, you'll learn that an average ability to apply intellect to practice score is not high. It is low. And this average ability to apply intellect to practice of a politician is evidenced by the reckless decision making we see them make and the chaos that these reckless decisions cause in my life and in your life. We see the whole time politicians make decisions to bring about a favourable primary outcome. However, because their ability to apply intellect to practice score is not high, they do not see the devastating secondary outcome that's going to come from that primary outcome, nor do they see the catastrophic tertiary outcome that's going to come from that devastating secondary outcome, nor do they see the fatal collateral outcomes that can coexist with the primary outcome or the secondary outcome or the tertiary outcome. And because of this, they go ahead and make an awful lot of decisions that bring, with the intention of bringing about positive, favourable outcomes that go on to have catastrophic effects in your life and in my life. And this, like I said, is what evidences their ability to apply intellect to practice score only being average, which is not a high score. I will finish off by saying politics is a sanctuary for the narcissist, the ungifted, unskilled, good at nothing version of the misfit, the sheep that would like to have a go at playing the role of leader, but when they get elected and play the role of leader, they get stage fright, and they're gone, nowhere to be seen. Politics is also a sanctuary for the incompetent, the all talk no action person, inexperienced, the actor who didn't get into acting school or amateur dramatics, socially awkward, the non-insightful, the impulsive who live today like there's no tomorrow, as well as the disappointing and weak and ineffective being. These are you could say are the defining characteristics and features of our politicians. There is, however, another type of politician in politics, not these things. What he is he's high IQ and high ability to apply intellect to practice. They also have, though, dishonourable character and are misanthropic. That is, they have a hatred for humanity. People annoy them. The stupidity of humanity annoys them. And they see people as being there to be taken advantage of, because they see people as just being stupid beings, and that's what they see people as being. And this type of politician is the politician that the dictator is, I'm afraid to say it. And they just see people as being there to be taken advantage of for their own selfish gains, also for the purpose of diffusing the anger the human race creates within them. And I think you would have to agree that at the time of this video being made, which is October 2025, that we can think of two politicians who could be described as being that other type of politician. I wonder who I'm talking about there. Well, I'll let you draw your conclusion on that one. I'm not one for mentioning names, because I think I'd be taking my chances mentioning their names in a video, discussing their names in the context that I would be discussing them in. I'll let you draw your conclusions on who I'm talking about, so I don't give anyone in any position of power any reason to target me. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it informative. And if you are one of the lucky ones that has a politician who's committed and passionate, look after them. And if you're unfortunately like the vast majority of us and has a politician who the contents of this video is very consistent with the practice of, then don't despair, you're not on your own, okay? Okay then, so, take care, and I hope you enjoyed this video. See you soon. Bye.